perfect are the gifts from you. So I honor your blessing by blessing the way you do.
Well, welcome back to session 2, and this week we're going to look at the lost sons. And sometimes this is called the prodigal son, right?
Yeah, the prodigal son is a familiar story. People know the guy who gets his money, goes to the far country, wastes it all, ends up in a pig pen, comes home and hugs dad, and it's all better. Even people who don't know the Bible real well know that kind of story.
Right, and we're going to focus on both sons, though, which I like because I've always related, sadly, more to the older son in some way. So what is the blessing that both sons have?
Well, the blessings they both have is a relationship with the Father that he's offering them. As a matter of fact, when the one son is in the far country, it seems he's waiting, watching down the road for his son to return, and he's seeking him. And the blessing all of us as human beings have, the very starting point is that the God who made us loves us and is with open arms waiting for us to come to him and experience a relationship with him, enjoy that. So at the foundation, they're part of this family, and they are promised a relationship with their Father.
And the Father here in the metaphor for God, of course. But here, both brothers have a relationship with the Father. They were raised by him, obviously very loving Father that pursues them and cares for them, and yet both of them miss it. The warning on this parable for each of them is a little different and yet the same.
Yeah, the one goes to the far country, and his heart is entitled. You know, he deserves what he's going to take from his future inheritance and demands it of his father, and he goes. And of course, he wastes it. It's kind of what we looked at last week. You know, he builds his life on sand and it collapses. The other brother is right there all the time while the prodigal brother is off in the far country. He's there helping dad, serving dad, running the household, doing what he's supposed to do. But he feels entitled as well. He doesn't say, give me my money so I can go. But when his brother returns and there's a party, he feels entitled to have a party. He feels entitled that he should get all that the prodigal who's come home has gotten, and he misses that he's had it all along. And that's the point that the father says to him.
So what is the context of this parable?
Well, Jesus is being accused by religious leaders for being immoral himself because he's just hanging out with publicans and sinners. And publicans were like traitors to the Jewish people who had compromised with the Roman government to really take advantage of their own people.
They're
and
sellouts.
So they're traitors, they're sellouts. And so they're vile and nasty and nobody likes them. But then he's also accused of eating with sinners, which he's actually doing. And these are people who might be prostitutes and others. And so he's got this group that the religious leaders are saying, this is just a bad group. And if he's going to hang out with them, then he's no good. But he then tells 3 stories about how the Father, how God has sent him to actually seek the lost, to seek the broken, to seek those that others reject. And so he tells the story first of the shepherd who has 100 sheep. He's lost one, gets the 99 safe in the pen, but he leaves them and goes and finds that one sheep. And he makes the point, just like the Father seeks the lost. And then he tells a story about a lost coin, a woman who has lost this coin that's a part of probably her necklace, that's a part of the dowry, kind of like today, her diamond ring, her engagement ring. And it's so meaningful to her, and she searches and searches and searches the house until she finds the coin. And again, he points out, it's like the Father has this intense search for us because he cares for us. And in the third and final story, we have the story of the 2 sons, the 2 lost sons. They're kind of both prodigals in a way. Yes. One obviously goes to the far country and wastes everything. The other is right there, supposedly being faithful and obeying his father, and yet we find his heart has a problem too. And it seems sometimes folks struggle that they're too bad, they've done too much, they've gone too far. Mm-hmm. No way can the Father receive them and welcome them, but he promises he will, and you can accept Christ today. And then there are those who say, I've done everything, this should be enough. It'll never be enough.
Right.
You need to understand you can't deserve it either because of how good you are, and you need to put your faith in Jesus too. And I think this would be a great conversation in the small groups about what it means to really know the Father and not be caught up in the stuff, the things of this world that can distract us.
So how does entitlement show up in each of these guys?
Well, right away in the early part of the story, the one brother says to the father, give me what I deserve.
Yes,
give
demanding.
me my inheritance. And then he goes and spends it. The other brother, however, has a sense of entitlement because he's saying, look, I have never disobeyed you. I have been here all the time right by your side, working in this household, and I deserve whatever you give him. I deserve it. I deserve it even more. And so there's a sense of entitlement on both parts.
And the comparison, especially for the older brother, that's really feeding the entitlement.
Well, I think a lot of entitlement, part of what the very concept is I am privileged and deserve more than you do. There's a comparison to it, or I should have this opportunity, or this door should open to me because of who I am, what I've accomplished. And that sense of entitlement not only causes us to have difficulty in our relationship with God, because we begin to focus on the blessings rather than the blessor, we also then begin to, with each other, like the older brother, wait, where's my party? Where's my fatted calf? Where's my robe? Where's my ring? You owe me this. Right. And yet God owes us nothing. None of us deserve the grace and goodness of God found in Jesus Christ. And that's at the heart of this, not only in our salvation relationship with God, but then in our daily walk with Him.
All right, so let's go to the really uncomfortable place of considering what it means for us. What are ways entitlement shows up in our life?
We demand from God because we expect Him to provide for us in specific ways, and we again focus, as the one who went to the far country and the one who stayed close did, we focus on God's stuff rather than on a relationship with Him. So in our relationship with God, it can show up, and it can cause us to think, well, I don't need a worship service, I don't need a small group, I don't need to read my Bible, I don't need to pray, I got it all together, and it can affect our relationship with Him. But it also then can spill over into how we treat other people.
For sure, yeah.
So there's a no parking sign. That applies to everybody else but me. Oh, there's a long line waiting here at Starbucks, but my appointment's more important than all their appointments, so I'm going to try to find a way to get to the front. They know my order. I'll just shout it out and ignore all these people. We do that when we're driving, switching from one highway to another. All these people are waiting, are chumps. Right. I will demand someone let me in right here. And then we do it with our kids and sports. You know, well, my kid ought to play more than this kid, and my kid's better than that kid, so coach, you better put him in because I'm paying for this club sport. Or it shows up in so many areas of our lives where we feel like we deserve something more than others.
I think it shows up even in our relationship with God sometimes, that you hear people like, you know, why do I have cancer? Why does my wife have cancer? Why does my kid struggle? It's just somehow not, I don't think we'd be so crass to say God owes me or I deserve this from God, because that sounds awful, right? Yeah. We know better than that.
That's what the older brother is saying. I've been faithful, so I deserve. Yeah. And we can do that as well. We can say, I have lived a life of faithfulness, and now my family is going to be touched by this disease. This cancer is going to, this is how, Lord, we deserve better. But when we start with the humility of, it rains on the just and the unjust. And so we're going to go through the good, bad, and ugly until we're with Jesus too. And actually, as we seek to live and love like Jesus, the world around us is looking at, okay, yeah, you've walked with God all these years, and now you've got cancer just like your neighbor over here has cancer. Now, do you have a sense of entitlement in how you're going to handle that? Or are you still looking to your God to trust Him and to walk with Him? And this moment is when I'm really watching you as an outsider. Are you going to live and love like Jesus in this moment? But if we just sit there in entitlement and blame God and say, how could you bring this into my life at this stage? Then we're missing the opportunity, again, just to live and love like Jesus in the ups and downs of life, like those around us experience, but we do it differently with Jesus.
Okay. So practically speaking, how do we guard against entitlement? I mean, some of it's so abstract. We know we need to be obviously more humble and practice gratitude. But I see it showing up in my language sometimes when you listen to each other. Yeah. Sometimes we're not real aware of it, but you can hear it in other people way more than we hear it in ourselves.
Yeah, I think when it gets to our language, our actions, pushing ourselves to the front of the line, all those different things, parking where everybody else, yes, shouldn't park here because it's a fire lane, but I'm only going in for a half hour, and so there'll be no fire, and I deserve this, I'm entitled. I think it starts in our own hearts and minds, and I think it begins with, okay, God first, people second, I'm third. I grew up in a church where I remember a Sunday school teacher saying, Jesus, others, you. That brings joy. And if you really think about Jesus first, then others, then yourself inside, you won't have a sense of entitlement. And it'll come out in how you speak. Right. It'll come out in how you behave, where you park your car, how you get in line, what you say to the coach, what you say to the teacher, what you say to your neighbor. It'll come out in how you treat the people around you every day. And if you get entitled, the opposite will happen. And people will know that you think it's about you and you deserve more than they do, and people will feel it. And they're not going to feel and sense Christ in you. They're going to sense and feel you in you, just like the other guy on the other side in the neighborhood, or the other parent in the classroom, or the other person who parks their car. You're just going to be the same. But we're supposed to be distinctly different. And we are people who have been greatly blessed by the grace of God that we do not deserve. And we get to people who live out that grace every day in our lives.
One of the things you said earlier about the older son has a comparative mindset. So he's mad because he didn't get something that his younger brother did. I think that's such an important point to highlight, that a lot of times our resentment or entitlement comes because we think we deserve something someone else didn't get. For example, I know I've heard this, in workplaces quite a bit, where people are like, hey, how come he got the promotion? How come, she got the job?
They got
I'm
the
better
better
qualified.
office. Yeah.
Yes, all of kind of that sort of, the comparative mindset really does rob us of understanding that this is God's grace.
Even when you're young, like say coming out of college, and you're trying to get that first job, and you start interviewing at places, you do an internship somewhere, and you go, wait a minute, I've got better training, newer training than this person has. I should have this job. And there can be this sense of entitlement that creeps in, and it all is based on comparison to others rather than starting with our relationship with God. That's the problem with the older brother, is he's comparing himself to the other son. He's not starting with his relationship with his father. He's defining the relationship with the father by what the son got, what he didn't get. It's all about the stuff. And so the stuff distracts him from the real relationship with the father. And that's so sad when that happens in our lives. I remember one time I was with a pastor in another state, and he was driving, and we were stopping by a place to have lunch, and he pulled into the 20-minute only pick up and leave, get your stuff that you've ordered, and leave. And he pulled up, and I said, wait a minute, they're going to use this. And he said, well, there are 3 spaces. They never have more than 2 cars, so they won't miss this space. I called him on it because, that's a sense of entitlement.
So did he move?
It took me a while to figure out how to call him on it. So I called him on it when we left and got back in the car and we were leaving. I finally said, before we got back to where we were heading after lunch, I finally said, I really had a problem with that. I felt like we were saying we're better than all these other people and we deserve this spot, and talk to him about it. I think we've got to be willing to do that. Maybe even have a discussion about how hard that can be as you talk together in the small group. But we've got to be willing to help each other, giving the warnings of what this looks like and how it can destroy our testimony for Jesus. And we don't want that for each other, and we want to encourage each other to experience deep satisfaction in the relationship with the Father. And so it's good for us to encourage each other to do what's right, but it's also good to share when there needs to be some correction. And we just have to guard against it. Satan wants us to believe we're entitled. It goes all the way back to the garden. He tried to convince Adam and Eve they were entitled to this fruit. God's holding it back from you. And the Father is never holding anything back from us. When we have a relationship with Him, we experience everything He wants for us. And it's Satan who will try to convince us we deserve something more, something else beyond that we deserve. And that's where we're robbed of the joy and satisfaction of a life with God.
Good and perfect are the gifts from you, so I honor your blessing by blessing the way you